Hi, everyone. Welcome from the Bronx in New York City. I'm delighted to be here today. Let me tell you a little bit what I want to cover in 45 minutes. I know, particularly during this time of the pandemic, everyone that's involved in taking care of children and child protection is under extra stress for many different reasons. So what I wanted to do was talk about the response to our bodies on stress, how to recognize it, things that we can do to combat it, and things that we can do in the moment, because our decision making is still so critical during this time, how that impacts our decision making and things that we can do to stay calm and take good care of ourselves. The other thing I'm going to talk about a bit is our own use of cognitive behavioral therapy on ourselves and the art of reframing, which is critically important. We'll talk about how we're coping and what decisions we're making about coping. And I want to end with creating a self-care plan. And there are some handouts also that Gal was wonderful to send out beforehand. A little bit about my work. I've been running the New York Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Children for the past 20 years. It's the first child protection agency in the world. Before that, I was the executive director of the Child Advocacy Center at Montefiore Medical Center in the Bronx. I've done a lot of work with the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, New York City Child Protective Services. I've served on the Child Fatality Review Team for over 10 years and rotated off last year in New York City. And I'm very passionate about the work of keeping children safe, and anything that you take away from this, I hope helps you in your work. And thank you for choosing this work, because it's difficult work, it's hard work, and it's extremely critical work. And I hope everyone takes away something from this presentation that will help rejuvenate them, particularly during this stressful time. Now, as I said, the NYSPCC, we were the first child protection agency in the world. We were founded by the ASPCA in 1875. They rescued a little girl named Mary Ellen, who you can see in the before picture. And then the attorneys for the ASPCA wrote the laws that started the child protection movement. And since then, my agency has investigated over 650,000 cases on behalf of 2 million children. You know, now what we do, because the government took over that responsibility, is that I have a trauma recovery program for children recovering from physical abuse, sexual abuse, witnessing the homicide of a parent. We have a therapeutic supervised visitation program for parents that cannot see their children unless a therapist is in the room guiding the interaction due to domestic violence, substance abuse, mental illness, child abuse, or a combination thereof. And what's particularly important about this presentation is that for the last 20 years, I developed and run the Crisis Debriefing Program for New York City Child Protective Services. It's called the RRR model. And anytime there's a child fatality or a worker is attacked in the field, our therapists go into the field office to stabilize the worker or their unit and help them put steps in place so that they can continue their critical work while they're going through traumatic stress or secondary traumatic stress. We also do a lot of prevention work and research work, and we have a training institute. But the crisis debriefing program, you know, is what we feel is important, that all child protective service workers have access to this type of support, and that it's not, you know, we are all first responders to child trauma. And that's why this program was embraced by New York City. And what you're going to learn today is some of the techniques that we use with the workers as we're helping them get back on their feet, as we're helping them manage the stress and the anguish or the anger that they're experiencing about cases. And the crisis debriefing program is confidential. What's said in the room stays in the room unless someone's a danger to themselves or someone else. And the staff have a high level of trust in us, and the contract has been renewed over and over for the past 20 years. And these are the steps that we cover actually in the debriefing sessions. We stay current on what's the stress they're experiencing now. And it's a place where what they're experiencing is validated and normalized. And we look back, who has been your support system in the past? Who can you count on to get you through these events? Because it's important sometimes when you are going through a crisis at work, you sort of feel the rug got pulled out from under you and you don't always remember who you could count on. So we help identify support systems. We do spend quite a bit of time talking about coping, what works, what doesn't work. And because unfortunately a lot of the work and the child fatalities or the material that people have to deal with is graphic, we also help them with stress management and thought blocking techniques, because you don't want images and different language and things popping up, disturbing your family time, disturbing your private time, disturbing your sleep. And this is just an adorable child, because one of the things that we also encourage people to have at their disposal at all times, on their phone, around their desk, wherever, is pictures of things that make them happy. Something that in the moment of stress they can look at that can help center them and bring them a bit of relief. So for some people, and I'll have different images as we go through this presentation for you to review. But for me, one of them is children, and my office is filled with pictures of happy children. And actually we have pictures of clients and of our staff's children lining the hallways at the NYSPCC. I just want to remind everyone that all of you who are in this field, if you look at your code of ethics, that you have an ethical and professional responsibility to practice self-care. NASW, APA, AAMFT, AAP, they all have something in their code of ethics that really talks about the fact that we have to be able to practice self-care and stay on top of our game, because that is how we're able to make good decisions for our patients and our clients. And you also don't want to walk into a room and your client says, "Are you okay?" That's not the type of dynamic that we want to set up. And I think what happens is that, particularly when we're in situations like we are now with COVID, the stress level is continuous. And many of us just feel this need to keep going and going and going and going. And what we really have to do is say stop and turn it off and take care of ourselves. Because if we take care of ourselves, we're going to be able to make better decisions and come back the next day and make more decisions, because that unfortunately is not going to stop, and it's going to keep, I think, a rapid pace during this time. So that's my question today. Is anyone feeling stressed? I've been reading, tons of notes from my workers on what are going on with their clients, and the work that we're doing with Child Protective Services, but we have all sorts of new stressors. There's, we're all looking at what is the new normal. In the Bronx in New York, we're still sheltering in place. Everyone is working remotely. Unfortunately, as we know, many people have been laid off. The client needs, there's food insecurity, they've lost their jobs, there's no more schools, the children are now there, people are unemployed. There's all those tensions, fear of getting sick, or if you are out at work, fear of bringing it home. And the other thing that I'm finding doing this work with Child Protective Services too is that the worries get worse at night. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, because the one other thing that we'll cover in this is how important sleep is, and how we all have to try to figure out how to get a good night's sleep every night. So one of the handouts that I gave was about stress. And, you know, when we talk about stress, sometimes we look at it as something that's going on out there. He stresses me, she stresses me, this, you know, job stresses me. And I want, for the purposes of our discussion today, I want you to think about stress as how your body is responding to everything that's coming at it while you're up during the day. And that is the definition of stress. It's not out there, it's in here, because what stresses me, you know, may not stress you, may not stress your significant other. But if you look at the categories of stress, I think it's really helpful, you know, that we look at them, and the checklist, you know, lists them, and they're behavioral, you know, physical, it's your thinking, it's how you're socializing with people, psychological. And I also think it's what's really key right now is that you realize that we are all under a lot of new stressors, and it is okay to be stressed. It would almost be a little odd if you weren't stressed. But the key is for you to have like a Geiger counter in your body when you're realizing, these are coming more often. They're not stopping, you know. And I, when we do the debriefings, we have people check off. You know, I know for myself, I've become more accident prone, changes in my sleep. The other thing I realize with, you know, cognitive. Have you ever read something and you get to the end of it and then you realize, I haven't a clue what I just read? And then you're sort of aggravated because you wasted time, and then you go back again and you're like, I still don't even, it just didn't register. And if those things start happening more regularly, or you're waking up, you know, every hour on the hour at night, or all of a sudden, you know, you have the feeling uncoordinated headaches, your heart rate increases, you have to sort of check in and say, all right, I have to do things to reduce my stress. What doesn't help right now is that some of the stress reactions are similar to things that are COVID related. So you have to make sure that they're stress reactions and that you're not actually getting sick. The other thing that happens, and this is another handout that we go through, is that when you are stressed, your thinking becomes distorted. And I think you can all relate to this, is that, you know, you take in, like for filtering, you take in the negative details of what is happening, you know, and you magnify them while you're filtering out, you know, any positive aspects of everything. You're going sort of straight to the negative. And that happens on stress, and our emotions are taking over. Or polarized, everything is black and white. There's no gray. You know, it's either it's gonna be a disaster or it's going to be wonderful. You know, and if you look at the handout that we gave, I think you can all try to figure out where does your thinking go when you're stressed, and then there's a mental key that tells you like what you should do to sort of stay in check with your thinking and think it through and calculate realistically. Are you really, you know, giving yourself sort of a fair shot? So what I want you to do now is I have a short video, because I think it's really critical that we tune into our body and we understand how our brain reacts to stress. And then we're going to do a little exercise on grounded breathing right after it. So, yep.
Firstly, let me define stress. Stress, The moment you perceive you can't manage the pressure, whatever that pressure is, be it at work, too much work, relationship difficulties, your body goes through a stress response. So your body goes through fight, flight or freeze. And what's very interesting, what happens to the brain. For example, the moment your body goes into a stress response, 60% of the frontal part of your brain starts to shut down. And we need the frontal part of the brain for decision making, analytical. You think about the frontal part of your brain as the chief exec center of the brain. The chief exec center makes the decisions, thinks about the decisions, thinks through the decisions. Now, if you only have 40% availability, it's going to reduce your decision making. So without a shadow of doubt, the moment you become stressed is the moment your decision making abilities go out the window by about 60%. So you're going to be making decisions which are irrational. Interestingly, the part of the brain that's responsible for emotions, the amygdala, it stays on, it doesn't shut down. So you have 100% availability of the emotional center and only 40% of the analytical. So is it a surprise you get annoyed possibly easier? Is it a surprise you may become more emotional? Because in essence, the front bit of the brain, left side more or less, tells the right side, stop it. But you don't have that availability. So it reduces your resilience. When your resilience decreases, your stress increases. When your stress increases, your resilience decreases. So within that circle, there has to be a point where you stop that. So what can you do to help switch that part of the brain that starts to shut down, the frontal bit, back on? One of the best things you can do is to step back, come away from the situation and start to breathe. Take what I call a 3-minute breathing space. So step back, move away, breathe in through your nose and then out through your mouth. So it's literally like this. The moment you do that, you start to change the stress response. You start to switch on that part of the brain, suddenly starts to go like this. And it means then you're starting to manage your stress, increasing your resilience. It only takes around 3 minutes, but you need to take responsibility for doing that. Most people who are in a stress response don't want to do anything about it. Their body's wanting them to stay there. So you have to make a decision, a choice to do that. Small things done consistently make a difference. This is the one thing, if you do it time and time again, starts to rewire your brain and increase your resilience.
Okay, so, and I think the one point too that I want to re-emphasize that she said is you have to practice these things consistently. I do this focused breathing when I wake up in the middle of the night and the first thing, something about work or something I'm worried about pops into my head. The focused breathing has enabled me to push it out and go back to sleep and remain calm. But I would like us all just to practice it, breathing in through our nose, and exhaling. Let's just do this just for this video it's like 2 minutes long, but I'd like to just practice it with you right now. So just enjoy the video, but I'd like you to just focus on the breathing. was just a little under 2 minutes, and plus it was just peaceful and beautiful. And I think that's the other thing. If you need these little breaks throughout the day, but if it helps to have an ocean, or if it's mountains or forest, whatever it is, if you can find something to focus on or imagery in your mind while you're doing the breathing, it's really helpful. Another point that I think we need help with during this time is to really look at doing our own little bit of cognitive behavioral therapy on ourselves, because I think, when it's very easy when you're stressed to get stuck in that unhelpful cycle rather than sort of move to the positive cycle. And reframing is what is really critical, I think, to getting us through the day and putting us in a good mood and sort of starting over. And it's things you can do for yourself, or it's things you can do for your colleagues or your family or your significant other. But this was just one thing. You start your day, it's more Zoom meetings, stressful sessions, you're in home, you don't like it, your typical monologue could just be, I want to go out, it's going to rain, I don't like how I look on Zoom, I don't want everyone to see me, including my clients. And if you start your day like that, that's going to have negative repercussions throughout the day, and you sort of need to catch yourself in the moment and then do that. If you go back, you're going to do that unhelpful negative, you're going to turn, no, let's come up with a helpful thought, positive feelings. Okay, let me get the coffee, organize my schedule, I have some new strategies, new resources, and then think of something else you could do. I know I work in a phone call to my mom each night, because that's something for me that I think I look forward to, and I'm happy to do it. But we need to practice that constructive self-talk and reframing. And I'm going to challenge you to think of a work example when you think a colleague needs reframing, and then how can you do that? How can you give them other ways of looking at things so that they aren't spiraling? Because the one thing I have found during COVID is that people understandably are getting more anxious and more depressed and more down quicker. And it's important for us to, again, begin to try to say, all right, let me try to reframe this. Let me talk to my supervisor and figure out if I can get help. Let me talk to a colleague. But practice reframing. This is just this is a picture that I have up in my office at work, because when I look up from my computer and I see this, it's calming. And in the heart of New York City, there's a lot of stress going on there every day. And sometimes when I just want to do my breathing or focus, I can just look up and look at this. And I hope that you have things of this sort, whatever it is, whatever type of art, that make you happy, that you can look at and sort of get grounded relatively quickly. Another thing that we do with Child Protective Services during the debriefing sessions, and this is also in a way, it goes hand in hand with reframing, is we call them prideful moments. And I did put that exercise in the handouts, because I think that right now we're taking in so much negative things that are happening throughout the world regarding the pandemic, that it's hard sometimes to keep the focus on the things that we're doing that are going right, and things that we are accomplishing with the children and the families that we're working with, and the good that our work has. And we have to keep that front and center, and we have to think of those things that are really helping people. One of the tips that my clinical team does, and I do it at my all staff meetings now too, is I end the staff meetings with what we call sunbursts. And we go around the room and everyone gives a quick sunburst. It's an example of something that happened to them personally, or with a family or child that they're working with, or a project that they're working on that brings them immense satisfaction and pride. Or they can call out another colleague and say, my sunburst goes to so-and-so because of the amazing job they did. Amy Pumo, my clinical director, started this, and it's caught on, and we use it now regularly. And I think it's another way of centering and reframing and refocusing on the good that we're doing every day too. I want to talk about coping skills, because coping, I think we just automatically say, oh, this is my coping, and we just sort of jump to it. But I want to talk with you a little bit and break down coping, because it's central to how we're handling all the stress right now. And coping is a process. We, I think, because we're so accustomed to coping with certain things, we don't look at it as a process. But really what we do every time we're selecting some of what we're going to do to deal with stress is, one, we're determining the event is stressful, then we're figuring out the coping strategy, and then we're implementing it. All right, but if it's a good coping strategy, then the impacts of stress are reduced. But if it's a maladaptive coping strategy, then I think, you know, it can make things better in the short term and worse in the long term. So we really want to look at adaptive, positive coping strategies during this time. You know, the maladaptive ones will work in the short fix, but if you have to, you know, if all of a sudden you're taking, you know, a pill to go to sleep, and then maybe you need a glass of wine and a pill to go to sleep, or maybe you need more than that to go to sleep, or, you know, you're eating a ton of stuff that you really, you know, you shouldn't be eating, but you are eating it, and you keep eating it, and you keep eating it. You know, that'll work in the short term, but it could have negative, you know, long-term impact. So what we want to try to do during COVID, and particularly when most of our coping strategies have been, you know, stopped, we have to figure out new ones. You know, for me, I would go to the gym every single day, and I have a best friend that I'd have coffee with at this little bagel shop, you know, in Midtown, and that's out the window. Those aren't happening. So now, you know, you have to figure out, I live on the 11th floor of a co-op in the Bronx. I'm walking up and down the stairs because I can't weight lift in the gym. We're doing a lot of Zooming and chatting and texting and phone calls. You know, but we have to figure out what is the coping strategy, and at the end of the day, is it going to make us feel better? And on top of that, during this time, I think we have to also make sure sometimes talking to certain people in our lives when we're really stressed isn't going to make us feel better. It's going to make us feel a little bit worse. So I think we need to figure out, when we're at a real high stress point, who are the people that are going to help us feel better? All right, I'm plowing through a lot of things because I have a lot to share in 45 minutes. Feed your mind good news, okay? It's completely understandable that people are on their phones, on the TV 24/7, but it's really can take a psychological, emotional toll on you. Because of our work, we're taking in sort of man's inhumanity to man on a daily basis with what we're dealing with child abuse and neglect. And if you're taking in on top of it all of the horrific COVID information, and you're not sort of limiting it, it's going to have a noticeable impact on your stress level. I mean, if you just look at the New York Times, the front page, pandemic death toll is much worse than reported. The economy shrinks at quickest pace since 2008 plunge. Biden's silence on sex allegation leads to a standoff. They sat for a game of cards, 4 dead, 25 sick at the Colorado Bridge Club. You know, Dr. Fauci can see a year without sports. Fire kills 38 in South Korea. I mean, and I can go on, not just the front page. You know, so do we really need to take this all in, and can we limit it? That's the takeaway from this. You know, I watch like 10 minutes of news in the morning, and I try to turn on the news like in the evening to get the highlights, to figure out, you know, planning for my agency, and to get the statistics on what's going on. But feed your mind good news. You know, do things that are going to, you know, make you happy. Watch a comedy. We'll talk about that in a minute too. The other thought blocking technique that we do use with CPS is called REST. It's called recognize, evaluate, substitute, treat. Okay, so if you're with your family and all of a sudden something about work which is not pleasant is popping into your mind, you recognize that thought and then you evaluate it. Is this serving me well now to be thinking about this issue when I'm here with my child, trying to get them to do schoolwork or whatever, you know, just trying to play a game at night, or you want to cook dinner and you have all these, you know, thoughts. You're saying, no, this isn't serving me well. So you have to actively substitute a thought. And it could be thinking about something that makes you happy. It could be thinking about the dinner you're going to make, a phone call you had with a friend, something you're looking at on Amazon, whatever it is, substitute it. And then if you do it, you treat yourself. You know, I used to say, go out and buy a Dunkin' Munchkin, but we're not supposed to go out. So make a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. But again, going back to the way that you practice breathing, you really have to work at this. And if you work at it, and I use this when I'm sometimes at night too, I think of pictures of when I'm on vacation. When I wake up, sometimes work is right there in the front of my mind. I'm like, okay, this is not good. I won't go back to sleep. That's my evaluation. So I substituted. I think of that pretty beach scene that I showed. You know, I think of walks, you know, and when I was able to visit, the last vacation I went on was Canada, and a walk that my husband and I took in Canada. And I substitute that, and then my treat is I go back to sleep. But again, these are things you have to practice. And that's just another adorable child that's up in the wall in my agency. Okay, I want to finish with the self-care inventory. It is critically important that we take care of ourselves every single day and not be weekend warriors. We have to find something every day that balances us, calms us, reduces our stress. I put the inventory in the handouts, and it's actually something you're supposed to go through and score and look at the different categories of it, and then you're going to see, where am I weak with self-care, and you know, where am I doing really well with self-care. You know, again, as they say on the plane, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first before you turn to the person next to you. And that's what we have to do in order to take care of others. All right, so the self-care inventory, if you have it, you know, there's physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, and workplace. And I think, again, going back to sort of coping, when we think of self-care, I think a lot of people go like just to the physical. And this is a time when we really need to look at all aspects of self-care and figure out how to work through them. You know, physical interventions, you know, are listed, but you know, the one that I really like is wear clothes you like, which sounds crazy, but it's true. Have you ever woke up, you put on something, you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, I don't like how I look. Well, change your clothes. Wear clothes you like. It's a physical little thing you can do to lift your spirits. You know, eat healthy, take time to be sexual. I think, you know, we don't even talk about sex in our field so much because I think we always see the negative side of sex. But I think during this time, we should also take time to embrace the good side of sex as well. Sleep. I cannot say enough good things about sleep. Interestingly, there was an article in the New York Times yesterday that the city that never sleeps, which is New York, is now sleeping more because so many people are home. But these are just some tips, you know, and the big one is, you know, stop the screen time before you go to sleep because it interferes with your sleep patterns. You know, unwind with a book or music, you know, whatever it takes. You know, the psychological self-care, what I really want to emphasize right now is therapy. There's a lot of people that are very stressed right now. There's a lot of good therapy sources available, both by phone, by text, by email. In New York City, it's New York City Well, that I think is going to be a tremendous support for all of us getting through this time. If you have a therapist, great. If you had a therapist, I always encourage people, including myself, go back for a booster shot and check in and, you know, see if they can help you through things if you think your stress level is you know, getting out of control. And with this too, say no to extra responsibilities when you can, and work on that, because I think there's a part of us as child protection professionals that feels that we have to keep doing and doing and doing. And sometimes trying to say, you know what, I can't do that, because if I do that, all these other things will not be done to the caliber I want them done. The humor is very important, and we're going to talk about that right now. Laughter, I think, is also, it gets your spirits up. It causes physiological changes in your brain and your body. And let's see, I think I'm going to show, I'll show both of these if I have time. But this is just something to make you laugh.
Earlier this week, I showed you a video of adorable twins talking, and we hired some experts who were able to translate their baby talk. And it turns out they were talking about April Fools.
But I hope that made you smile. You know, I don't have time to show you my Lucy video, but this is the one with Lucy and chocolates. It makes me, I must have watched this video around 10 times over the course of, you know, the last few years. When I show it, it always makes me laugh. But that's what I'm talking about. Find things that make you laugh. Watch a comedy, watch something that makes you happy. You know, spiritually and emotionally for self-care. You know, I think it's critical that we look at, you know, things that we're grateful for, talking about things that, you know, contributing to causes we believe in. Right now is another time where there's lots of ways to get involved. Although in New York, you know, we can't participate in spiritual activities as a group. We can do them remotely. You know, spend quality time through Zoom or phones with people that you know, that bring you peace, and people you care about or people you're concerned about. I've also found something that I'm doing lately is I'm just sending a text or a phone call to people that I haven't been in touch with since COVID started. And it's so nice to reconnect with people and just let them know, hey, how are you doing? I'm thinking about you. I hope everyone's healthy. But maintaining those contacts is emotional and spiritual self-care. You know, and again, social support, it's important that we keep that going through this. because, you know, with all the sadness that's going on, we also need that life balance, that people in our lives that are outside of the work that we do are there for us. And they help us stay positive. You know, workplace, professional self-care, you know, we're all working at home. Try to figure out how to make your space comfortable. Get up and take walks every 15 or 20 minutes so that you get a break and you're moving around. You know, try to set limits. Turn your phone off at a certain time. I think it's also important during this time to get regular supervision, whatever that looks like. And if you can't get regular supervision from a supervisor, then maybe from your peers. But you do want to do professional self-care as well during this time. I know for my staff, there's been new opportunities that we're doing a lot more work through video conferencing, and we're working on a digital platform for our child sex abuse prevention program called Safe Touches. So there's interesting new work coming on too. But it's important that we look at that and we practice the breaks and the things we need to keep that self-care going professionally. And I do want you to schedule this into your day. Pick one or two things that are on that list and actually schedule it. So thank you. Thank you for tuning in. I do hope that everyone can take something away from this that will help them. I hear a lot of static. I hope I'm still on. And if you have questions for me, you can contact me at the NYSPCC. I'd be happy to answer any questions later or now. But thank you, and thank you for taking the time, and please take good care of yourself during COVID.
Mary, thank you so. It's a beautiful picture. Thank you so much. People are saying on the chat that this is a great way to end the work week. And that was a very stressful one for so many people. Where the first video was from, the one where the woman talked about the 60% of the brain.
Yeah, that is a great video. If you go onto YouTube and you type in the words resilience at work, that video comes up. And I use it all the time because, when you get stressed, it's so funny when you think about how sometimes when you're stressed, you get so emotional, or you get angry, or you yell at people, or you're irritable. And when you think about it, that just makes it so clear and so concrete, because the decision-making part of your brain is shutting down while the emotional part is running full steam ahead. So it makes sense. And I think it's a 3-minute video that you can really use. You can use it with clients, you can use it for training, you can use it with your colleagues. It really describes it quickly. And then what the breathing does to open that back up.